Welcome to this week's 7 Spheres of Influence, and tonight's sphere is business. So I'm here with 3 members of our congregation, Chris, David, and Emily. And I'm going to ask each of them, and you firstly, Emily. Emily, tell us, what do you do? And do you see that as part of your calling to follow Jesus?
Cool, thanks, Jamie. Well, to introduce myself, I'm Emily Fletcher. I'm a portfolio manager in emerging markets for a big US listed asset manager. Would I say that it's my calling to be there? Actually, to be honest, it's something I've really struggled with for quite a long time, that particular word calling. I'm not sure it's really possible to be called to work in a US investment bank. And especially as I came out of the university, I think for the first few years, and all my friends were off doing things which I still deem sort of much more worthy, I really struggle with that. But where I've got to on it is that I have certain skills that God's given me. And in my job, it's a place where I can use those skills really well. And I really try every day to use those skills to the best of my ability. And I pray continually that God would show me if it's the wrong place to be. I've worked in the same place for 14 years, but I've had multiple times in those years when I've expected to be fired, and I'm still there. So I've come to the conclusion that God wants me there, and I just try to hold it very lightly and not let it define me as a person.
Brilliant. Thank you, Emily. Chris, how about you?
I'm an economist. I set up Longview Economics in 2003. So what we do is we're a small consultancy, really. It's kind of a boutique, and we try and take economics to investment advice and advise people, not Emily, but people like Emily, I suppose, on how to go about investing in global markets and things like that. Would I say I'm called to business, called to what I do? Occasionally I struggle like Emily, but I would say absolutely yes. No two ways about it. It was a miracle that I ended up starting a business, to be honest. So I started in 2003 when I had 4 young kids and I'd just been sacked from the city. And I was sort of scrubbing around wondering what to do. And Jo, my wife, who makes all the big decisions in our marriage, suggested I started a business. And I prayed about it and I felt God say, well, go and speak to your father, as in earthly father, who's not a Christian. He's a great guy, great man, has been a businessman. And I thought he was going to say to me, well, don't be so ridiculous. You've got 4 kids under the age of 6. Go and get yourself a job. I said, I thought I had a good idea. And he said, well, all his mates who started businesses in their 30s, it worked because it had to work. And he went so far as to give me some money to get it going, a small amount of money. So, I really felt God answered that prayer, and God's been in it the whole way, I would say. So, yes is the answer.
Wow, thank you, Chris. And moving slightly away from finance, David, how about you?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. So my role is a product manager role for an international oil services company. So I head the group that builds products for subsurface or earth modeling. So my kids find it a bit hilarious that I'm the head of modeling in this company. I've been doing it for 23 years, not this particular role. I've had many, many roles. This is the latest on the string of roles, but I've been in this company for 23 years. And when I started, 23 years ago, I really was thinking that I didn't want to work in this direction. I wanted to do something more in ministry and everything. And through a lot of prayer at that time, God just told me, go work. And I really didn't expect that. And over the last 23 years, it's been an amazing experience. And I've not found the work per se to be the calling. There are many of the jobs I've had that have been, I'd say, less than motivational or even inspirational, but I've wanted to be in other cultures. And we've lived in 8 countries now for periods of 2 to 3 years at a time. So we've been able to live in different cultures. And when I look back, I can understand God's calling, which is to go live as a Christian amongst different cultures and different people and just be light and be salt and be whatever where you are working. And so that's how I go back and remind myself all the time. Similar to Emily, I often question, is this meaningful? Is this worthwhile? Is this how I want to invest my one wild and beautiful life? And then I realized, well, this is what God's called me to do. And he's called me to be present amongst colleagues and friends and to just lead in a way that is maybe a little bit different how others would do it. So I feel it's a calling. I still question it often, but I do feel it's how God has led us.
Thank you. And David, how has work changed for you during lockdown?
Well, it's changed a huge bunch. So I normally travel a lot internationally. That's all gone. I've been working from home since March. So every day sitting in a chair. Every day is back-to-back team meetings and Zoom calls for 12 hours. Very little time getting up, very little getting out. And it was never like that. Before it was meetings and brainstormings and whiteboards and travel. And now it's just call after call after call. And I find that very challenging. It takes a lot more self-discipline to do it. Work-life balance vanishes. The merging of life, home life and work life sort of vanishes. And that's been super tricky. And I've also taken a new job, the one I'm in now in London. And I've had to build a team from scratch. And building a team digitally is very inefficient. It's very hard to win trust if you can't look people in the eye or spend time with them or go just have an informal meeting with them. And informal meetings over Zoom are hard to sort of make happen.
Thank you. And Emily, how about for you?
Yeah, thanks, Jamie. Similar to Dave, I guess I've sat in my chair now for about 6 months. Luckily, it's quite a comfy chair. There's obviously challenges of working from home. There's bits for me actually that I love. I feel like I just save the commute time. That's like 20% extra time a day when I can work just for free. For me, I've got, similar to all of us, 3 small children. Chris has got 4. And just being able to have extra time with them has been amazing. And actually, even if I'm just sitting next to the kitchen and I can hear them in the background, I really love it. I just feel like I'm closer to them than I would be if I was off in the office. And the same, not having to travel. So it's made a lot of aspects of work harder. I think 20% extra work isn't under exaggeration. I probably work 30% more hours, but I love not having to travel and being home with my family, as long as they're at school. That was awful when they weren't.
I would echo a lot of that. Yeah, I haven't been traveling, been at home. It's nice being close to the family. Mine are a bit older, but they're still around, quite a few of them. I mean, actually, I think we've been much more efficient as a business and more effective. And the other thing is, I mean, markets have been fascinating, so that's great for me. That's very interesting. And actually, we're a bit like lawyers. We do quite well when times are tough. So we're fortunate in that respect. So yeah, it does get a bit samey, but I've got better at going out for runs. I think that's about the only antidote, isn't it? Or finding coffee shops in strange places.
And a bit of home studio set construction too, it looks like.
Yeah, exactly. So you can sort of half see it. We film YouTube videos from here, and from my colleague Harry Colvin, who's also a member of HTC. He does some from his home studio as well. So yeah, it's amazing what you can do these days. It really is incredible. Not quite Shakespeare writing plays, but doing our bit.
Yeah, more bite-sized, rapid social media content.
Yeah, that's right.
Brilliant.
But he did write a play, didn't he, under the pandemic? He wrote 1 or 2, I think.
Exactly right. Who knows what Shakespeare would have done with this time and the technology that we have today. And for each of you, how do you handle stressful situations? When there's sort of crunch points, you've got to make difficult decisions. You each work in quite high-octane work environments. How do you handle those moments?
I think for me, the key that I found to survival is just to separate the view of who I am from how I'm doing at work. Like the two are not linked. I have value because I'm made by God. He created me and he loves me. And that makes me an infinitely valuable person. And that's just utterly separate from how I'm doing at work. And I can be the world's worst farm manager and totally underperforming and doing terribly in the eyes of the world. And it just doesn't change my value as a person. I just cling on to that, I think, when work is going badly, and it's infinitely stressful. We're just measured on performance on a sort of minute by minute basis, so whether we're doing well or badly. And the more I can separate that from being what I am worth, I find it gives me the strength to just keep going. And all I can do is my best, and we're just told to just work at things with all our heart, and that's all we can do. And that's enough. And I think it just gives me the ability to leave it there.
I think over time I've sort of made I have a process for stressful decisions, and I approach them in a kind of systematic way. So the first thing is that I try to understand that, look, no one's about to die. So hopefully I'm not in a life or death stressful situation. So whatever it is, like we're going to get through this. We're going to make a decision. We're going to move on, and it's going to be okay. And I also realize that making a decision is what's required half the time. And we don't know what's right or wrong, but we need a decision, because the decision lets us experiment or move in a direction, and the more we move, we discover, right? So often the fear of making no decision, which my nature wants to do, is just do nothing and just let it work it out, is bad. So I have to just force myself to say we need a decision. Then I gather as much information as I can. I speak to as many people. I get as much input, and then I do nothing for a few days. I go for a run. I think about it. And often when I'm exercising, for doing something, mowing the lawn, washing the dishes, whatever I can do physically, the creative ideas will come to mind that I need to make a smart decision here. But I've got this input that I take. And then I don't really go out and ask for a consensus. We don't vote, or I make the decision of what we have to do. And then I tell people, okay, guys, I've heard you all. Thanks. I've gathered all your information. I'm making the decision now. This is the reason why. Get behind it. Let's go. Right or wrong, let's do our best to make this decision work. So that's how I handle it. It's like a standard process that I follow now, which is not from a book. It's from years of experience. That's how I need to make the decision. And so I feel at least I've heard people, I've given it thought, and I've made the decision. Often when we ask our people, what do you need most from your managers? They often say, I need them to make a decision, And so we try and come back and say, okay, we're going to make a decision. 90% of the really stressful decisions are people related. Those are the ones that make me stressed more than like other types of business decisions. It's about people, right? I mean, our business is in decline. So we go through a lot of releases and a lot of movements and a lot of family situations we have to deal with to help people. And those are the ones that stress me the most. And I try and put the same process in place.
I concur with a lot of that. I think the shower moments are very helpful, aren't they? After you've gathered all the information, when you sort of washing up, I wash up a lot. But actually, what I like to do is I like to pray in the mornings. God, He speaks to us, doesn't He? And not necessarily when you're praying. It can be when you're washing up or whatever. But I agree. I always think the Hannah Whittle-Smith framework is quite useful. The 5 CSs. Communion, the saint, compelling spirit, commanding scripture, and so on. But I like to pray through, think it through, look at it, address it head on. And actually, God has been genuinely amazing. There's been a couple of times when people haven't been quite right for the business, and it's been, I would agree with Dave, that's almost the worst thing to have to deal with. And it's not for any reason because they're not great people. It's just they don't fit. We're a very small business. And I've had 2 incredible, miraculous moments when I've decided on a day that we've just got to bring this to an end. I've been half an hour away from a phone call with a lawyer. And I remember one guy rang me up and resigned half an hour before that phone call, which in my mind is a miracle and a wonderful way to end it. So, I mean, it's not always that wonderful, but God, I think God is amazing. If you give him these things, he really comes through. And he either gives you the tools or he does the job himself, which is great.
And in each of these weeks, each of these sessions, we're looking at the vision statement of our church, which I'm sure you'll know is every life bearing fruit for Jesus. And as we think about the sphere of business, what would you each say are the challenges and opportunities for Christians to bear fruit for Jesus in the business world?
I think there's a gazillion, isn't there? I mean, it's harder now in a small business, but when I was in the city, we ran some lunchtime alpha courses in the 90s in the company I was in, which was wonderful. And we did the whole session in 15 minutes because people didn't have much time. I've employed some fantastic people who've got incredible talent, but probably are beyond conventional, so might not be employed in typical businesses.
Because of the area that I work in, I actually end up meeting business leaders, whether that's politicians, development finance institutions, central bank governors all around the world. And I think the company that I work for means that the conversations I have with them carry a fair amount of influence. My belief is actually that the capitalist system that we have has tons of flaws, but is probably better than a lot of the other systems that are in place. And working within that, if some of these governments make good decisions, the ability that has to influence upon sort of millions and billions of people worldwide is actually really significant. When I do work with some smaller economies globally, I think we have the ability to really do that. So I think that's one. I think the other one is actually the opportunities that we get. And I would just encourage people, I guess, who are more starting out, but the training that you can get in working for business is amazing. And you can take it to do all sorts of other things afterwards if you want. But understanding how business and finance work is just an amazing training ground to go on to do other things. And I really have felt that the longer that I've stayed here, actually, the more skills I have developed. And that's been amazing.
Wow, fantastic. And how about you, David?
So one of the ways is just very, say, personal to my experience, which was just God being able to take business people into different parts of the world where maybe it's not that easy for Christian people to go. And so we got the chance to work in Iran or in India. And it was through the business that we got to do that. But we got to live and lead in a way that was maybe very different from how people experience others. And so that was a real chance to just show people what a difference having Christ in your life can make. And we had lots of opportunities in those countries to invite people over for dinner, to talk about our faith, or at work to lead in a way that put people first, or showed that you can love people, really take the individual seriously and not just the corporate sort of organization. I would encourage anyone, if they get the opportunity to travel with their job, to take that travel to experience cultures and to carry Christ with them as they go. And then the other way, I think, is that in my day-to-day job, there's just so many little things that I do. Like often in the morning when I'd walk into the office and walk down the corridor, I'd walk past the doors and cubicles of all the people that work for me. And so I'd just pray for them as I'd walk past their names, and so I'm praying into the life of the team, and I'm praying that they'll do a good job. I'm praying that they would find meaning in this job. We're able to bring a whole new way of working for them, giving them, again, personal attention, loving them in the corporate culture, which is a very weird thing to sort of say, but it's something that often people feel, that they don't feel seen, or they don't feel appreciated, or they don't feel that someone actually cares for them and their career, or even understands their family, that it's only the job that's important, And so as a Christian, you're able to say, no, I get it. I get your family. I can work with you on that. And that just makes somebody feel valued. And that opens opportunities for them to ask, well, why? Why does that person make me feel valued? And then it leads to more discussion around Christ. And then I also think we carry with us a duty of care for people and for environment. And so in my industry, oil and gas, it's not a clean industry. It's, it's got a lot of issues, but we can start to bring an idea of energy transition, or how can we be part of the solution to sustainability rather than just big oil that's creating pollution, And so as Christians, we carry those ideas into business and industry as well. And so we can influence, and like Emily was saying, you bring that other perspective that is maybe not always there. One of the real challenges I have with being a Christian in business, as I progress along the sort of ladder, I feel that the demand of business requires me to make sacrifices I'm not willing to make, right? To move up in the company requires me to dedicate more time. So my boss works 7 days a week. I'm not willing to work 7 days a week because it means the other things that are important to me, my family and my faith, are going to be impacted. I'm absolutely sure a Christian, should be the CEO of a company. But how do you get there without having to pay all these prices around it, right? Is a sort of question that that's what I'm exploring now. How do you continue to take on responsibility, which you want so that you can influence for good, without having to pay what seems to be the price that these people pay? Either they lose their marriage, they lose their family, they lose their health, all the things that I value in a more holistic life. And so that's just one of the sort of open questions of, how does that? I don't have an answer, but I'm curious about that. So to Emily and Chris, I'm very curious to know,
That's basically exactly what's on my list. And I think I would just put the color on it of being a working mum, which I think is just maybe even more unusual in the church mold, and just how you manage to have the impactful relationships with other Christians when time is just so constrained. And I think I would agree with Dave. It's just ever more constrained. And my fear of coming out of lockdown, everyone is so used to us putting all these extra hours, is how you retract them. In that I've never really experienced work retracting hours before. It's just been an ongoing creep for most of my career. So I would really echo a lot of those sentiments. There's a huge tension there, I think, in work, family and church, and in finding time.
It's true. It is true. Well, I'm always encouraged when I think of George Bush Sr. He was renowned, wasn't he, for being home for dinner every night. I mean, pretty much, not exactly, but he was renowned for, if he can do it, I'm sure with the help of God, by the grace of God, but it's true. It is a real pressure. Absolutely. Can I just say, I think it's important to say that God is absolutely in the workplace and working his miracles 100% of the time. I could sit here for hours and talk about how many times he's rescued us in the business and helped us and guided us and inspired us. And I really would encourage people to carry their faith, like Dave and Emily have been saying, into the workplace, because God is alive and he's so much there. It just excites me every day.
Guys, thank you so much for all that you've shared, and I'm really inspired by the distinctive way in which you lead and influence in the macro and in the micro in the business world. So thank you so much for your time, especially as I know that you're all very busy. But thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you, Jamie.
Thank you. Thanks, Jamie. Yeah, appreciate it.